and negativity around Europe. I mean, not evident particularly in today's futures, but certainly we're nervous about France. Mark, is that negative around Europe narrative making its way to where you are in Asia?
Absolutely. I certainly am getting increasingly bearish on Europe, and it's not like I've been particularly positive for a long period of time. We talked already yesterday about how this week, with the low liquidity, with month end, you wouldn't want to read too much into short-term price action. So I wouldn't want to get too carried away about the recent yield moves in France. But the longer-term story has been there. We knew about this weeks ago. We knew about it even going into the US election. We now know, going up to the budget, which is likely to come to a head in December, that it's going to get much more tense for France. The backdrop here is the Eurozone has suffered 2 years of stagnant, sluggish growth, and it looks like next year will be equally bad. So this is in a multi-year kind of slump, lack of growth. The budget situation is very, very concerning in France, and there seems an inability to impose the fiscal constraint that is needed. And I think the outlet for this pressure, this combination of poor growth and yet rising yields in some problematic cases, which adds to the stress, but a lack of real yields in Germany at the core means that ultimately the outlet will probably be the currency. So I think the euro has more downside in the months ahead.
Mark, let's turn to what is happening in America, because that appears to be where all the action is, or at least the positive action. American consumers are very, very, very bullish when it comes to stocks. Is that a reason for a bear potentially to pause and rethink?
No, probably not. As you know, having been super bullish all year, I've kind of swiveled on US stocks 2 weeks ago. And so therefore, I'm inclined to kind of go, oh, look, this will help my cause. Therefore, it's a contrarian kind of bearish signal that people are so bullish. I had a quick look at the kind of run of the statistics here. It tends to be a coincident indicator. It is shocking how bullish they are. And generally what you find in these sentiment indicators, at extremes, they can be a contrarian indicator. But I can't claim there's any statistical evidence to back that up. So at the moment, it's a coincident indicator which matches the fact that we just had US stocks close at a record high. So sure, people are bullish right now. It'll probably turn down when the stock market turns down. It may not be a leading move.
Mark, let's talk about the EM story a little bit. We saw the Mexican peso get hammered. We've seen the yuan weaken as well today to some pretty significant records. Do you get exposure to EM right now or for the next 4 years? How are you thinking about that?
In context of that, I thought it was interesting that story out this morning on the Bloomberg terminal about, Goldman's even more optimistic on South African inflation than the government is, and kind of thinks that, the South Africa story is very good and they'll stay relatively insulated to the US story. And I think that reminds that ultimately EM is a very divergent story. I think what's most controversial might be the idea that I'm not as bearish on a lot of Asia as other people might be. I think that a lot of Asia is priced in the more negative story. If US is going to raise the expense of doing trade with America, Asia has an ability to be a little bit more insulated from that to some extent. So I think some other EMs can do well as well.